Of course, Chukas Balak is a double parsha, and there's a lot of topics in it. In each of the parshas, there's a lot of topics. And it begins, of course, with the Para Aduma, which was the red heifer that was burned. And that was used to purify people who became ritually impure with the dead. And then we have the death of Miriam, unfortunately. The passing of Aaron HaKohen as well and his burial. We also have the battle with Sichon and Og at the end of the parsha of Chukas. We also have the story with the copper snake, where the Jews are bitten by snakes, and Moshe makes a copper snake which they can look up to and pray and are saved. And then the whole Torah portion of Balak is really about Bilam trying to curse the Jewish people. Balak is nervous because the Jews are nearby. He's afraid they're going to try to make trouble for him.
Yes, it is.
Questions? Anybody?
Yeah, if you want.
I'm going to have to mute you all. If you don't mind, you can unmute yourself if needed. So, the point is that, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good. So, the king of Moab hires Bilam, who is apparently a well-known prophet of those days. Welcome. Are you a new student?
A Goyish prophet.
A Goyish prophet, yes. And he says he's only going to be able to speak whatever Hashem tells him to. And of course, he thinks he's going to be able to sneak in a curse or two about the Jewish people. An angel comes with a sword on the way and tells him, tries to warn him to behave himself. And he doesn't really take the warning. Welcome, welcome. And instead, he continues on the way, but of course, he doesn't see the angel. The donkey does see the angel. The donkey tries to turn to the side, sit down. He gets mad. He beats the donkey. The donkey talks to him, reprimands him. He's not impressed, and he continues on his way. And of course, instead of cursing the Jews, he ends up blessing them because that's what Hashem told him to do. But he took one parting shot at the Jews before taking leave of Balak. And he said that the Jewish people's God hates impropriety, sexual impropriety. And the way to get to them would be by causing them to sin. So he basically tells this to Balak, and Balak arranges for a fair where the Moabites are selling their wares, and he sets up the Moabite women to seduce the Jewish men. And as a result of this, Hashem does get angry at the Jewish people, and the plague starts raging amongst the Jewish people. And although Moshe tries to take charge and tells the people to kill the men who were sinning, there's one troublemaker who his name is Zimri, who publicly violates the laws and takes a Midianite princess into his tent, basically completely going against Moshe's wishes and doing his own thing. And the people seem to be powerless and nobody's doing anything. Moshe's crying, everybody's crying. This fellow was a prince, he wasn't just a regular person. And then Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron Cohen, takes a spear, as we read at the very end of the parsha, and he kills them, and that stops the plague. So we're going to learn a few of the verses inside, and then we'll talk a little bit about them. If you got the handout, great. If you didn't, you can just listen. Actually, can we have somebody read? Perhaps somebody who did get the handout. Sorry for the late, for it coming so late. You volunteers?
The print is a little too small for me.
Okay, so I'll read it. Vayar Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen vayakam mitoch ha'eda vayikach roimach biyodo. Hello?
Sure, he's spreading the good news.
Can unmute yourself as you, if needed. Vayavayach ish Yisrael ala Kuba vayidkar Hashem as ish Yisrael v'seishal kavasa v'tayotzer ha'magefa me'al b'nei Yisrael. Vayiyu ha'mesim ha'magefa ha'ba v'esrim olef. A certain Israelite man came and brought a Midianite woman over to his companions. In the sight of Moshe and of the whole Israelite community were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Pinchas, son of Elazar, son of Aaron, the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, and taking a spear in his hand, he followed the Israelite man into the chamber and stabbed both of them, the Israelite man and the woman, through the belly. Then the plague against the Israelites was checked. Those who died of the plague numbered 24,000. Now, what exactly Pinchas see? The verse says that Pinchas saw. So Rashi explains, Ra'a Maisa v'nizkar halacha. He saw what was being done, and he was thereby reminded of a law on this subject. Amar leila Moshe, he said to Moshe, Mikublani mimacha, I have received a tradition from you. Haboyel aramis kanoin poigin boy. He who has relations with an Aramean woman, Aramean is a borrowed term for a heathen woman, a non-Jewish woman, kanoin poigin boy. Zealous people may attack him. He replied to him, Moshe says back to him, let him who reads the letter be the agent for executing it. Straight away, he took a javelin in his hand, a spear, as we read earlier, and he proceeded to take care of business. So it's a very interesting halacha we have here. The Jewish system of reward and punishment is usually not given over to the hands of vigilantes. We have a system, we have witnesses, we have warnings, we have policemen, we have judges, and then we have executioners if necessary, or other forms of punishment as needed. We don't usually allow people to take the law into their own hands and just start killing people. There are several exceptions, of course, one of which is a roideif. If somebody is running after you to, God forbid, to kill, you're allowed to kill them. You don't have to ask any questions. You just do what you need to do to protect your life. And there are several other exceptions that a person is allowed to take the law into their own hands. But generally, it's not allowed. You have to go through the court system. And the court system, by the way, is not very quick to mete out punishment. Certainly not capital punishment. Capital punishment was very rarely used in the Jewish court system because it was a lot of technicalities had to be fulfilled for it to happen. So it was rarely ever used. But here we have an exception to the rule, as I mentioned. And that is that a kanoi, a person who is zealous, a person who is very upset about the sin that is going on and the desecration of Hashem's name that is going on, can take the law into their own hands and actually kill the people involved, which is exactly what Pinchas did here with Zimri, one of the princes of the tribe of Shimon. He wasn't afraid of him, wasn't afraid of his fellow tribe members, and he killed him together with Cosbi, who was also a princess, the daughter of one of the princes of Moab. And this act was not considered a sin. On the contrary, he became a hero because the plague stopped after that act. And Hashem accredited him with stopping the plague, as a result of which he became a Kohen. He was, in fact, the son of a Kohen. Elazar was his father, but he slipped between the cracks because he was born after Elazar became a Kohen. And when he was born, his father was not yet a Kohen, so he had never become a Kohen. And it happened as a reward for what he did by killing Zimri and Cosbi and stopping the plague. So we have to understand what is so unique about this particular sin, which is basically the sin of intermarriage, and why it is that vigilantes can take the law into their own hands in this particular sin, unlike other sins, but the court does not deal with it after the fact. If the person would be dragged to court after the act, the court would not put them to death. It's not like adultery or incest or similar sins where we say it's a capital punishment, it's a capital crime, and if the person is warned and there's witnesses, or the people are warned and there's witnesses, they could be put to death. It's not like that. It's a punishment that can be meted out only at that time and not later. So why is that? That's number one, question number one. Another question is that this law is never explicitly stated in the Torah. We learn it out from this story, but it's never explicitly stated. In fact, even when Moshe told Pinchas that he was allowed to do it, he never said, yeah, that's a good idea, go ahead. We just read the language of Rashi, where he says to him, the one who read the letter can carry it out. Meaning to say, he didn't explicitly say it. He said, yeah, it's true, but he didn't tell him to do it. Because this is a halacha that is halacha ve'ein moirinke. It's a halacha, but we don't say it as a matter of policy. If you do it, you do it. But we don't tell somebody to do it. So Moshe therefore didn't say, yes, do it. He just said the one who read the letter should be the one who carries it out. And he had to figure the rest out. And that's also why in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, it never says that a person's allowed to kill somebody else for committing the sin of intermarriage. It just says, if somebody kills him, we don't punish that person. But it doesn't say that that is what is actually the right thing to do. So it's almost like an unspoken halacha, an extrajudicial halacha. But why is that? Why is it so unclear? Another question on this whole story is that if you recall in last week's Parsha, we had a whole to-do about kahuna. Korach wanted to be a Kohen. And the members of the tribe of Reuven wanted to be a Kohen. And Dasan and Aviram. And Moshe says to them, Boker, it's like the morning. you can't change night to day. You can't change day to night. And if you're a Kohen, you're a Kohen. And if you're not a Kohen, you're not a Kohen. There's nothing to do about being a Kohen. You're either it or not it. It's simply a border Hashem made in the world. And right now, we go right ahead in the next parsha, and we say, oh, you're a good boy, Pinchas. You did good. Yasher koyach. Keep up the good work. And your prize is to be a Kohen. Okay, so you'll say, well, he was the son of a Kohen after all. Okay, but for whatever reason, he was not a Kohen. He was born after, his father was not a Kohen when he was born, whatever. Okay, but the fact is he was not part of that border. He was close, but he wasn't in. So how did he become a Kohen? By doing something, if being a Kohen is an essential part of who you are. So these are the questions. Before we get to some answers, maybe we'll stop and ask if anybody has any questions or comments or answers or just observations, things you wanted to share about your kids, your grandkids, your puppies, whatever, you name it.
Maybe if you have to think about it, if you don't do it right away, it's not being zealous for Hashem. It cannot be counted as zealous.
I hear. That's a good point. In other words, if it has to do with being zealous, it's not the sort of thing that it can say explicitly. Because then a person can say, well, I'll do it because I'm supposed to do it. It says it in the Shulchan Aruch, it says it in the Gemara, it says it in the Chumash. So I'll do it. So it has to be not explicit, and therefore only a person who's truly zealous will do it. I do hear that. That's a good point. But once again, the question is, if it is such a bad sin, and the person who commits it does deserve to die, then why is it only through a zealous person? When it comes to adultery, the adulterer cannot be killed on the spot. He has to be taken to court. But if he's taken to court, the court can kill him. Here,
but he did it in a way that was aggravated the situation.
Absolutely.
He didn't do it just for himself. He wanted everybody to see it.
Absolutely. Zimri's sin,
Zimri, yeah.
not a private sin at all. Zimri's sin was a very public, flagrant violation.
That's what I'm saying.
Which he did in front of everybody, and he was making a mockery out of Moshe and Moshe's laws. So it was definitely way above just a private matter, which is certainly what got Pinchas going to the extent that he did, and that's why he was zealous, no question about it. But to a certain degree, every time a person sins in this way, it is making a mockery out of Hashem and the Torah, because they're saying that it's not important to me, and I can just opt out of the Jewish nation, God forbid, if I want to. So it's not as flagrant, obviously, as Zimri. Zimri's was certainly to an extreme. Yes.
Can I, we were learning yesterday that it is a part of our neshama, of a Jewish spirit, that is sometimes subconsciously telling us moral things that should be done without complete knowledge of all of the details. And I thought that that's a part of the chukas. It's just some of the rules that may be a little bit difficult to explain in a practical way, but we know morally that it's wrong. And for some people to break this moral rule is so difficult to understand or painful to tolerate that they have to react. For some people, they're just simply or don't care or not so aggravated by that. But for For Pinchas, I think it was so vividly clear that it's not the right thing to do, that it would set a bad example, that it's against, especially to do it as a demonstration was really a kind of a bad example to everyone. That's why it could be a combination of his very sensitive spirit, his neshama that was really trying to follow the right things, and someone who really tried to break all of the rules of morals. I think it's kind of a very, very specific situation. But in general, in that situation, I think there were probably a number of people who did not agree with this act, with the situation that happened. But Pinchas was probably one who really wanted to react on it and felt that he has a moral obligation to get rid of this, especially if it was a plague that definitely was kind of punishing
Right.
Jews.
Yes, Pinchas definitely tended towards zealousness, and he was a person who had definitely the spirit of Hashem in him, and we see that later on from the various activities that he did in his life, no question about it. And certainly what Zimri was doing was something that deserved, that kind of anger directed at him. So it was definitely a confluence or a coming together, if you will, of two very different people in that standoff and that situation, no question about it. It's interesting, by the way, that not everybody agreed with Pinchas's behavior, because in the beginning of next week's parsha, it gives the lineage of Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, and Rashi says, why are we giving this lineage? Because people were speaking negatively about Pinchas, and they were saying, who does this guy think he is to kill a prince of the Jewish people? Pinchas was actually a descendant of Yisro.
Rabbi, I don't hear you.
Sorry. People try to call me, and the calls override the Zoom for some reason. I don't know why that works that way. Anyway, the point is that not everybody agreed with him, and that's why Hashem and, of course, Moshe had to give his lineage and explain he came from Aaron, and what he did was actually a good thing. So, before we go into the Rebbe's answer, I'll just tell a story. Since we're talking about intermarriage, I'll tell a story that I came across last week, even though it's not directly related to what we're talking about, but nevertheless. Okay, so there was a woman in Argentina. Jacqueline was her name, and she was engaged to be married to a nice fellow by the name of Pierre. And they had their whole wedding planned out in a beautiful location with their closest friends and all the best caterings and, all the things that go together with the wedding. Now, Jacqueline was Jewish and Pierre was not. And it didn't really bother her, except one thing. And that is that she had heard that it's important for a Jewish person to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. And she was nervous, because what would happen if she passed away before her husband? How could she ensure that she would be buried in a Jewish cemetery? If he would pass away first, and then she could, arrange it with whoever would be next of kin after him, she would be able to arrange it. But if she would pass away first, she was nervous that she would end up being buried in a non-Jewish cemetery, even though she was young. But this bothered her. And she didn't know what to do about it. And she kind of delayed thinking about it. She put it out of her mind. But it kept always creeping back up into her mind. And she didn't know what to do. And the wedding date was coming closer. And one day she got a job in a shul. She was an artist by profession. And a certain shul in Buenos Aires hired her to do some artwork for their invitations, for their calendar, just some stuff they needed done. So she was sitting in the foyer of shul for a few days doing the artwork. And on one of the days, the secretary of the shul comes over to her. She got to know her a little bit. And she says, listen, I have to go away for one day. Can you please fill in for me just for one day? So she says, yeah, just tell me what to do. So she says, well, you have to answer the phones and you probably won't know what to answer them. So just take a message and tell them that I'll call them back. Now, if anybody comes in and wants to meet with the rabbi, you give them a paper and it's a form and they have to fill it out and they'll write all their information and what they want to meet him about. And then we'll get back to them and set up a meeting. And she gave her a heads up and she said, you know, people are going to come and they're going to try to tell you the sob story. You don't have to listen to the sob stories. Just explain to them that when the rabbi comes in, you'll give him the paper and the rabbi will listen to whatever the story is. So Jacqueline agrees and she comes in the next day for work. And she's answering the phone and she's taking messages and some people come in and they fill out the paper. And then a woman in her 70s comes in and she looks very emotional and very upset. And she says, I need to speak to the rabbi. And Jacqueline says, here, you have this paper, you fill it out. And she doesn't listen and she says, no, I need to tell you. And Jacqueline says, don't tell me, you'll tell the rabbi. And she just goes ahead. And she says, listen here, I'm not Jewish, but I was married to a Jewish man for many years. And last year he passed away. This one?
Okay, those are what?
Excuse me, please.
Okay, I'm gonna find it and I'll get it. Okay.
This is what happens when I work at my wife's desk. You get it. Let's see it. Anyway, before my husband passed away, she says, he said, please make sure I get buried in a Jewish cemetery. And after he passed away, she says, I didn't know what to do. I don't know how to arrange a Jewish burial. I don't have any Jewish friends. I don't know any rabbis. I don't know any cemeteries. And I felt bad, but I didn't know what else to do. And I had him buried in a Lutheran cemetery. And now he's coming back in my dreams. And he's telling me that he has no rest in the next world because he's buried in a non-Jewish cemetery. And I need to have him unburied and reburied in a Jewish cemetery. And I don't know how to do that. I need the rabbi to help me. Now, Jacqueline is listening to this story and she is obviously completely blown away because this could be her in 50 years. But of course, she can't say anything to the woman like that. So she just says, listen, the rabbi will call you, fill out your paper. And the woman is beside herself and she's crying and she fills out the paper and she goes off. Anyway, when the woman comes back the next day, she tells her everything and the regular secretary tries to make an appointment for this woman to meet the rabbi to arrange for the burial, and they can't track her down. The number is the wrong number, the address doesn't exist. To this day, nobody ever figured out who this woman was. But Jacqueline was so impacted by the story that she broke off her engagement to Pierre. She moved to Israel. She married a Jewish man. She became religious, and she now has a religious family in Israel. So that's the story of Jacqueline. Now, going back to what we're talking about, which is about this unique punishment called kanoin poigimbot, that a zealous person can take the life of people that are sinning in this particular sin of intermarriage only at that time and no other time. So what is this about? So first of all, we have to understand the whole idea of reward and punishment that we speak about in the Jewish religion and the Torah. How does it work? What's the purpose of the reward and of the punishment? Let's focus on the punishment, since here that's what we're dealing with. Why does a person have to be punished? Is Hashem angry? Hashem mad? What gain is there by punishing the person? Is it a deterrent just to make sure they don't do it again? Well, what is it about? So the idea is that when a person sins, they actually create a negative force in the world. Everything we do in this world creates either a positive or a negative force. It says in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avos, a person who does a sin creates a prosecuting angel, and a person who does a sin creates a defending angel. What does it mean, a prosecuting angel and a defending angel? That means that the very energy of the sin, which now becomes negative energy in the world, that in and of itself is the prosecuting angel towards that person. And the very positive energy that a person creates with a mitzvah, that itself is the positive defense angel for that person. Now, when a person is punished, what the punishment does is that it actually rectifies that particular sin that was done. And that's why punishments are midah keneged midah, measure for measure, because the way to uproot the evil is in a similar way that the evil was created. So, for example, if a person sinned in a way that that the world at large in a very negative way, without getting into any details, perhaps they have to be killed. The Torah believes in capital punishment. Of course, it was rarely used, like we said, but in theory, it could be. And that public display of what was the punishment for this sin perhaps that was the only way that the sin could be rectified, because it would bring home to people who became aware of that, of how very negative that sin was and that impact on the world is and was. And that perhaps is the only way to rectify this. And then, of course, there are punishments that are obvious rectifications. Like if somebody stole, they have to return. And if somebody stole, perhaps they have to pay back double, because the person who stole caused distress, not just physical, financial harm, but distress. And perhaps they have to pay back 4 or even 5 times, depending on what they stole, as we read in other Torah portions. And this is all to try to rectify the sin. Now, what is unique about the sin of intermarriage more so than other sins. So this relates to what we were saying before about the borders that Hashem created. Regular sins, even though they're against the will of Hashem, are all within the borders of the Torah. So it's an improper action, improper speech, perhaps even an improper thought, but it's all within the same realm of the Torah. A person is not crossing the line outside of the boundaries of the Jewish people. It's a sin that they've done within the boundaries of the Jewish people, and it has to be rectified, and it has to be punished perhaps, but it's all within the boundaries. God forbid the sin of having relations with a non-Jewish person. That is actually stepping outside of the boundaries of the Jewish people. Because Hashem, chose the Jewish people, made us a unique nation, gave us a specific mission to accomplish in this world, and therefore a person who is stepping outside of those boundaries is saying, this is not who I am. When in fact, that is who he is. That's his very essence and core. And he's denying that essence and that core. In general, we need to point out, the Rebbe says, that the sin of improper relations is a sin that goes to the very essence of a person. And the way we know that is that relations between man and a woman is the only act that can create a baby. When a baby is created, that baby comes from the very core and the very essence of the parents. When a person does another action, another speech, another thought, that is a very particular, unique thought, speech, or action. When a person does an act that can create a baby, whether it actually creates a baby or not, but it has the potential of creating a baby, that act reaches into the very essence of a person. And that's how it has the power to create another human being, because it comes from such a deep place within that person. This is also, by the way, why it is that the child of a handicapped person is not necessarily handicapped. A blind person can have a seeing child. A deaf person can have a hearing child. A handicapped person can have a well child, and so on. Why is that? Because all of those handicaps are external. They're not internal. The person still has the power of sight. It's just that his physical eyes are damaged, physical ears, physical legs, what have you. But the essential power that's in the soul, to see, to hear, to feel, to walk, meaning to say, to progress, the soul has. And therefore, that is what is given over to the child, the essential part of the parent. In fact, the Talmud says, Yofa koyach haben mikoyach ha'al. The power of the son is greater than the power of the father, can be greater than the power of the father. We have many examples where the son far outdoes the father. Moshe Rabbeinu. His father was a great man, but he wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu. David HaMelech, his father was a great man. He was Yishai, but he wasn't on the level of David. And so on and so forth with so many great people whose fathers were perhaps not on the same level. So that's because they come from a deep level within their father, or mother, by the way, of course. This applies to daughter too. And that the father had that potential within them, or the parents had that potential within them. Perhaps they never realized it, but the child got the potential that the parent had. And the child is the one that is perhaps tapping into that potential that the parent never tapped into. The point is that all of this is to demonstrate why any sin of sexual impropriety is considered a very severe sin, because it means that the person is using their power that comes from the essence of their soul in a sinful manner. In fact, the Talmud says that there are three partners when it comes to creating a baby: the father and the mother and Hashem. The father and the mother provide different genetic material, obviously. And then the mother eats and provides, the nourishment for the baby to grow during the 9 months. And Hashem provides the soul, of course, and all the powers of the soul, which the parents cannot provide. So this act is an act of partnering with Hashem. And even when it comes to the part that the parents provide, which is the body, it's really the power of infinity that is within the parents that allows them to have creation. Because the act of creating a baby is really the power of infinity. Because the baby can have a baby, who can have a baby, who can have a baby, in theory, forever. And this power to be linked to infinity is something we have because we come from a very high level of Hashem, who is infinite. So when we have a baby, we're tapping into that aspect of ourselves, connecting to Hashem's infinity. And then, God forbid, a person takes all of these powers and all of this unique ability and invests it in an improper relationship. So it's a complete misuse of Hashem's gift in this power of continuity of life. And that's why these sins are treated with particular, severity. Yet, in other cases, we don't find this idea of kanoin hoigen boy, which we said means that the zealous can take the law into their own hand. We don't find this in other cases. This is unique to this case of relations with a non-Jewish person. And to understand that, we have to go back to what we were saying before about the borders. So when a person sins, let's say in an adulterous relationship, the product of such a relationship is called a mamzer in Hebrew, which means a bastard in English. Now, the law is that a mamzer has like a blemished soul. And the mamzer is not allowed to marry into the rest of the Jewish community. They can marry another mamzeres, right? A person of a similar status. But they cannot marry into the regular Jewish community. But at the same time, this is all within the borders of the Jewish people. The person has not stepped out of the borders of the Jewish people. And the Gemara says that a mamzer, Talmud Chacham, koidem lekoyin gadol am haaretz. At the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, they had kohen and gedolim, high priests, who were not learned people. They were wealthy people who would bribe the Roman authorities to be able to be the high priest. So perhaps they were amei haaretz, they were unlearned. And you might have a mamzer, right? That's a bastard, a child born of an illicit relationship. Yet if he's a Torah scholar, he deserves more honor than the Kohen Gadol. It's true he can't marry to the regular Jewish people, but he's a Torah scholar, he deserves more honor. So he has redemption, so to speak. He has redemption. And the same thing, a person sinned in other ways. They can do tshuva. And the tshuva is something that fixes that sin. Now, when it comes to the sin that we were mentioning of intermarriage or of relation to the non-Jewish person, that is considered to have crossed the border between the Jews and the non-Jewish people. And in theory, you would think that perhaps they should be so incompatible that a child perhaps cannot be produced from that union. You know, when a cat mates with a dog, you can't. There's no child. A dog with another species of dog, if it's close enough, yeah, you can have a child. But a cat and a dog is too different. Now, of course, human beings are all human beings, and we're all made in the image of Hashem. We have great similarities with each other. But spiritually, there's a big difference between a Jewish person and a Jewish soul, and a non-Jewish person and a non-Jewish soul. And that's why it's really unusual that this gap can be bridged in terms of them being joined in creating a child together. And the only reason that it's possible is because Hashem gave us free choice. And because we have free choice, therefore he had to make this act able to create a child, because otherwise it would be like a miraculous thing. Hey, this doesn't work. There must be something really different about us. Hey, we got to become religious or whatever. Hashem doesn't work in such overt shows of the Torah being true and so on. It has to be more subtle. So the point is that the person who sins in this way has given his power of the infinite and the power of his soul, crossed the border with it, and given that power over to other nations outside of the pale of the Jewish people. And because that crossing of the border is so, that's an impossible act. It really should not be possible. Actually, I forgot to say, how does it actually work that the border can be crossed? Should be impossible to cross that border. The Rebbe explains it's only because, and this is a very deep concept, it's only because the Jewish person is rooted in the highest level of Hashem. And at the highest level of Hashem, there is actually no difference between Jew and non-Jew. Because Hashem decided that Jews are different. Before Hashem decided, they were all the same. So a Jewish person who has a root in that very high level is tapping into that level when they break through that border, and that's how they are able to break through that border. Nevertheless, because within this world, or within the borders of this world, it's really an impossible border to penetrate through. So after it is penetrated, it seals up completely. It's like you broke through the border wall, then it comes back down, and you can't get through. So practically speaking, if a person does have a child with a non-Jewish partner, that child is not considered the halachic child of both parents. If the mother is Jewish and the father is not, then the child is a child of the mother, and halachically not of the father. Child is Jewish, but halachically has no connection to that father. Even if the father converts and becomes Jewish, that connection is not there, because at that time that they got together, it was a breaking of the border that could not be fixed. Now, a non-Jewish person can cross the border through conversion, but what he did before is completely separate from that. And the same is true if it's a non-Jewish mother and a Jewish father. The baby is not Jewish, and halachically, that Jewish father is not even related to that baby. If the mother converts, the baby converts, that's wonderful. And they're, of course, biologically connected. And maybe they can even get married in a halachic manner, that's wonderful. But they're not halachically considered like a father and a child, because at that moment that the border was crossed, it couldn't remain, the connection cannot be there because the gap is too great. So the border seals itself up and cannot be, the connection cannot be maintained. So coming back to what we were asking, and then we'll pause if anybody has questions. We were asking before, why is it that this sin is one that there's only a punishment at the time and not afterwards? At least not this punishment afterwards. And why is it that the punishment is only through a kanoi, through a zealous person, and not from the Torah itself? So here's what we have come up with. And the idea is that this sin is one that is even beyond the borders of the Torah. The Torah does not even address this sin explicitly, because it's one that really should be impossible to even transgress by the Torah's laws. The way it happens is only because of the Jewish person having that connection to Hashem that is beyond the Torah. But within the Torah's realm of discussion, it's like so outside of the pale that it's not even explicitly discussed. It's just alluded to here. We see what happened to Zimri, what Pinchas did. We can learn from it, but it's more of a story than a halacha. A halacha cannot address it expressly because it's completely beyond the pale of halacha. And that's why it doesn't say clearly in the Torah, do this and do that, because it cannot come from the Torah. It can only come from a kanoi, from a zealous person. What's the idea of a zealous person? The zealous person is a person who really cares about Hashem. He's connected to that very high level of Hashem. He's a person who's willing to put his life on the line, because, by the way, it's a dangerous proposition. If Zimri would have turned around and killed Pinchas, he could have been considered to have been acting in self-defense, and Pinchas would have been killed, and that would have been the end of it. So it's a dangerous position for a person to put himself into. And if he's doing so, it's because he is so incensed, because it touches his core, because he's connected to that very level, that high level of Hashem, that this is impacting, that this act is desecrating. So it has to only come from a person who has that sense of upset, and coming from that level, because he recognizes the sin that it's impacting on that level, he and only he can be the one to act. And again, it's not within the confines of the Torah, it has to be outside of those confines. And that also explains why there is no punishment, because the punishment is only meted out when there's a continuation of the bad energy of the action in this world. And that's only true when it's a sin within the realm of the Torah. But this sin is outside of the realm of the Torah, so whatever energy went to that realm, it's done. It's outside of the realm. It's not connected anymore to the person who did it. So therefore, it's only a punishment that can happen at that time and cannot be done afterwards. Now, the truth is that the person himself who did it gets a punishment between him and God because of the blemish in terms of how it affected their soul. But in terms of the punishment in this world, because the action is not connected to them anymore, because it's a connection that can only happen at that moment. It's not a normal kind of connection, because outside the pale, as we explained, that's why there is no punishment other than that, only at that time. All right, I feel like I gave a bit of a long lecture today.
Good.
Can I ask a question, please?
Please.
Actually, it's two. One is, what happened if, let's see, the father is not Jewish, but the mother is Jewish? Does anything is changing in life of a child that is born from this relationship?
If the child is a girl, she is not supposed to marry a Kohen in the first place. She's Jewish.
And if he's a boy, he doesn't get Kohen.
If he's a boy, he can't be a Kohen. His father
He doesn't get Kohen as an Aliyah, right? That's a...
Well, he's not a Kohen. He just can't be a Kohen. But yes. But other than that, no, regular Jewish person.
And another question is it any discussion, or at least an idea, that the act that Pinchas did by killing these two lovers, or whatever, two prince and princess, was it because he was anticipating the birth of a child who would really be non-Jew, and especially if it's a prince, as a father, would never have a chance to transfer his soul to the, to the offspring?
I don't know if that was because of one child. It was more because of the whole camp and the whole nation and the whole thing that was going on. It was really the nation was on the brink. You know what I'm saying? They managed in Egypt to maintain their identity. Here they're about to cross into the Holy Land. If they can't even stay separate from the local women before they cross, how much more so after they cross? So this was kind of like a test for the Jewish people's ability to maintain itself as a nation.
Oh, Chilul Hashem. I mean, this wasn't even somebody sitting in a corner. He publicly took her in the middle of the square in front of Moshe and Aaron.
Yes.
And they were fornicating in public.
Well, it was in a tent, but it was like public because they went into the tent.
He carried them out in a spear.
Yes.
This was not hidden away stuff. Be real. He got them both with one spear, and the nest was that he carried them both out on the spear. What, they got dressed while they were on the spear?
Yeah, but
yep, this is true.
Actually, a third question, if I might. How this knowledge, how is this such an important idea and rule is conveyed to young people in different religion kind of, I know that we have been to a conservative synagogue so many times, definitely in the Reform. I have never seen it even mentioned as a sin or a problem or even an explanation why it is such a wrong thing to do. It's just...
Unfortunately, in those denominations, I don't know what we would call them, but in those streams of Judaism, unfortunately, they don't consider that a sin necessarily. Some, unfortunately, might even celebrate it because they consider, well, we're adding more to our ranks, so to speak. But in fact, that adding is not adding at all. That is diluting. You know, when a person has an extra leg, that's not a good thing. You only want to add something that's beneficial and not something that's detrimental. So yeah, I don't think they speak about it because it's such a big problem that they've just given up on it and just they no longer consider it wrong because they can't address it. But we have to address it, and we have to teach our young people to stay within the faith, not to denigrate other faiths, other nations. They have their purpose and they have their reason for being, and they should be well. But the Jewish people have to maintain ourselves as a nation, as Hashem's nation, and we have to, of course, be careful about who we marry and who our children and grandchildren marry.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Like the bracha, it's the bracha in Fiddler on the Roof. May God bless and keep the Tsar far away from us.
Yeah.
Very good. Have a good Shabbos, everybody. Next week, back to Tuesday with Hashem's help.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Thank you so much.
And thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.